good evening, good morning, good day, wherever you are dialing in from. We'll just spend a couple of moments to allow everybody to arrive into the room. Okay, so I think we will begin, and Abigail, you are able to control the waiting room and the list, so I'll kick off now anyway. So welcome everyone. Today's the next episode in the Leading with Influence series of webinars, which its genesis comes from the Leading with Influence report, where we sought to understand, identify and seek the traits of exceptional future leaders in the legal area. Today's episode is really interesting. We will be talking about constraints, its advantages, its disadvantages, and the speakers we've invited today will provide strategies for managing and leveraging constraints to turn obstacles into opportunities, both on a personal and on a human level, and to ensure that legal leaders are more resourceful, creative, and innovative. So who we have got today, I'm absolutely delighted to welcome Erin Bosman, who's the co-chair of MoFo's Class Action Mass Tort Practice Group, and is the founder and co-head of Artificial Intelligence Group. Clients value Erin's, if I may add that, Erin, business strategy, seeking comprehensive counsel throughout product lifecycle, especially in high-stakes litigation and product recalls. And in a moment, I'll ask Erin to introduce herself as well. Our second guest is Darcy Verhun, who is the president of Canada's leading diversified healthcare organization. And not only does Darcy lead the organization, so he's a leader himself, but he's also an author or co-author and somebody behind a book called Freedom of Constraints, which I have here. So it's something also that we can discuss a little later on. So thank you so much both for coming. So Erin, today we're talking about constraints. And I just wonder, how would your introduction be influenced by that topic?
Absolutely. Well, thank you, Alex. Thank you for having me with you. What's interesting as I listened to you give the introduction, I thought, well, this sort of explains for me how I did deal with a constraint just within my practice area. I was one of those who went to law school to be a trial attorney and loved the thought of being in the courtroom. And I still do. I love the court. But what I noticed was you would handle these litigations, and oftentimes afterwards, that was it. And your relationship with the clients, even though very strong, they didn't have another piece of litigation. And as I also said, the clients didn't necessarily like it when your phone came up, your phone number or your email, because often it meant that there was a problem. And for me, I have a business background, and I really wanted to find a way to partner with my clients so that I was with them throughout their business and being able to help them. And that is what really got me involved in focusing on the full product life cycle. And so now I work with clients from development of a product. I work with consumer products, medical device, pharmaceuticals. As you mentioned, the AI practice group is just fascinating for me. I really enjoy that. But it's finding a way to let the constraint for me, which was a limited relationship, and trying to find a way to build that into a relationship and a partnership where I could be working with clients, knowing what their business needs were, and therefore being able to try to help them with risk mitigation, with advisement, and realistically helping them avoid the litigation, even though, of course, for me, I do enjoy those litigations, but for my clients, the best for them is to never end up with that lawsuit, and of course to never end up with that recall. And so that's how I came into really this practice area that I sort of created for myself.
Thank you. The one thing I really enjoyed hearing from you is the word but. So you noticed something, there was something in your system, there was something already existing and non-existing, and there was a but, and that's actually, it signals our relationship with the limitation, where we can jump over that but and decide what we're going to do there, and you did that. So you created something out of that sort of coma and then but, so that it didn't exist for you in your system. So congratulations, I think it's a great story. And Darcy, thank you so much for joining us. Where are you dialing in from?
I'm dialing in from Calgary, Alberta, Canada. So it's just after 10 in the morning here, and it was, I think, minus 12 this morning. So we're heading into winter here. So
how romantic. That's all I have to say. I'm imagining the snow already and jumping on the skis. We'll talk about skiing in a moment. So Darcy, again, bearing in mind that today's conversation is about constraints. How would you introduce yourself?
Boy, I think that's an interesting question. I'd say last year, midsummer, I came to the realization through dialogue with a designer, Aisha Bursell, that constraints actually spark innovation and creativity and create opportunities. And I got to say, up till that conversation, my mindset was that their constraints are just that. They're constraints. And and through the dialogue with her, it caused me to pause and reflect and realize that as I look back through my life, there were defining moments or situations filled with constraint, and how I responded to those constraints kind of defined who I became. And our organization's 13 years old. It's a private company. We have over 300 clinics across Canada, and we've just gone live in the United States as well, in California, with 650 doctors on my team, 3,500 employees. And as a company, we operate on a kind of a line of credit, and we're filled with constraint, and yet we look for opportunities around every corner. And so with that concept, I had this bucket list idea of always writing a book, and I thought to myself, as the world's collectively dealing with COVID as a shared constraint, I thought, like what a perfect time to try to gather perspectives. And in the case of the book, I was able to access 29 other individuals to share their personal perspectives around constraints and how they create innovation and so forth, and packaged it in a way that we're hoping to have an impact, not just for business or leaders, but also for individuals, and to share our insights through our life journeys and experiences with everyone, to help everyone view limitations or challenges or constraints in a different way as an enabler.
Thank you. So congratulations on publishing the book and ticking up that one thing of your bucket list. If publishing a book was one of the things on your bucket list, I'm curious what else is there, but in spirit of keeping to time, maybe we'll put that into another session. I wanted to ask you, Darcy, what limitations, self-perceived or otherwise, did you have to overcome to publish a book?
Oh boy, number one was time. And I've had it on my bucket list since 2014, when I was asked to be a keynote speaker on the topic of high performance team, high performance culture. And I was following Simon Sinek and Tony Jerry and world famous people, and I'm not famous, but when I got up on the stage, what hit me was I'm following on people that had taken the time and figured out how to share their insights in a book, and so it became a bucket list. But I didn't do anything about it. It just stood out there as a goal. And last year in February, got myself signed up for a group where every week we would meet for an hour and we would share our life goals and our progress. And one of my life goals was to write a book. So every week I would report, we had a red, green, yellow, and every week it was red. It was red all the time. And finally the group said to me, well, we think you're kidding yourself or you've got the wrong goal. Like there's something's not working here because it's not changing. And that still didn't cause me to do anything. But when I struck on the concept of the constraints being opportunities, that got me thinking, and it kind of gave me a vision. So time was something I had to deal with, and so I thought to try to break it apart. And recognizing I had limited time, I thought, well, how could I still achieve my objective? And that's where the idea came of reaching out to friends, and through the 100 coaches that I'm part of, I tap people on the shoulder and shared, well, here's my thinking on the topic. Here's the dream. So trying to enlist others in my dream to create a book and to have the impact that we wanted to have. And I found as I went through that process, it was quite engaging, and I learned actually an unintended outcome was that I built relationships with the co-authors that I wasn't kind of expecting. I was looking for a shortcut, I think, to deal with my constraint of time, and in the end, I'm not sure that I saved time. And what I gained was relationships with the other authors and a whole experience that I had zero experience in self-publishing and compiling a book. So I had to learn every element from designing the cover to getting an ISBN number to everything in between. And I guess I learned through that one of my passions is learning and is reading. And going through the process of creating the book really fueled that kind of part of my core being, which is learning.
Wonderful. So just a couple of constraints. So the time was a constraint, zero experience was a constraint, zero skill, as in acquired skill, and multidisciplinary skills such as cover design, and prior to that, contacts and the resource group as well. So quite a few constraints that you've, quite a few limitations that you managed to pass through. Amazing. So before we carry on, I just would love to connect with the lovely audience who are very kindly giving us their hour. So welcome everybody. We've got 80 people here with us today. We would love to hear from you. So you can put your name and where you're dialing in from, just to create that sense of shared community, and we will then crack on with our content. But yeah, use a chat, please. Just let us know where you're coming from today, where you're dialing in from, and your name. That'll be really lovely to see who's here with us today. Lovely. We've got Sarah from New York City. Hi, Sarah. Tessa from San Francisco. I won't be able to probably read everybody's name unless nobody else adds their names, but I've got Karen, San Diego. Lovely. Hi, Adriana, France. Okay, moving quite quickly. Lovely. Phil from Scotland. Love Edinburgh. Jason in Denver. Hi, Liz from Washington. Great to have you here. And as I said, if I haven't mentioned your name, it's just the names are speeding past quite quickly. Hi, Marina. Hello, Anke Vandana. Hi, Amanda. Hello, Mary from LA. Wonderful. We've got such lovely international community today, and different time zones as well. Becky in Alaska. Hi, Paula from Washington. Wonderful. So everyone, we're talking about constraints today. How would you, Erin, define a constraint? What is a constraint?
I think constraints can be different. I think we've all learned so much in the last 2 years, but I think we need to look at a constraint as a limitation from what we are wanting or trying to do.
Okay. So limitation from what we're wanting or trying to do. Okay, lovely. Darcy, anything else to add? And this is no right or wrong, by the way. We're just figuring it out, unpacking the actual concept itself before we work with it.
Well, what pops in my mind is, is it real or is it perceived?
Mhm.
And I think one of the concepts that comes through in the book is that the stories we tell ourselves, sometimes can be just perceived, and like how do we know is something that you need to explore as you look at a constraint or a challenge.
Mm-hmm. Wonderful. So as a question now to the audience, would you mind, whoever's comfortable, what kind of constraints and limitations are you currently facing? And this is without a judgment, whether it's detrimental to you, whether it's actually positive, something that is giving you focus. But what kind of constraints, if you could put in a chat, you yourself are currently experiencing? I'll start with that one. Time, universal. I shouldn't be saying that, I'm a coach. Time constraints. Adriana, I'm with you on that one.
Well, one that we're a health organization, and boy, as a constraint, this the concept of being vaccinated or not, and the personal freedom and choice decision around that, and what's our organization stance is quite a challenge that we're facing right now, and working our way through it, and what our patients' expectations in terms of us in relation to vaccines as healthcare providers. So it's been a pretty significant constraint and challenge that we're wading our way through.
I'd actually love to look back just to hear how you're navigating this, because this is such a multi, we've got so many perspectives coming into that. You mentioned personal freedom, there is political agenda, there are other issues, but I just want to have a look at it in a chat. Rosalinda, you've got lack of resources. Yes, Danielle, you've got a budget constraint. We've got competing priorities. And interesting, Adriana, you're saying mindset, openness, and daring. That's right, constraints from team members. So it's, constraints can be many things. And as Darcy said, it could be something that we perceive to be a constraint, and that's very much linked to our mindset and our perception. And I'm always very wary to say to people, well, change the way you think about it. It's easier said than done. Easier said than done. And you said, Erin, it's about what we want, and it's about what we're trying to achieve. And sometimes that constraint can actually be very motivating. It can gear people up to do something. Depends on exactly what we say to ourselves. What other constraints? Just would love to hear from our audience. What other constraints are you potentially currently either grappling with or working with? Feel free to type it in a chat to let us know, and we can respond to that as well. So while you're thinking about it, would love to really hear from you. Erin, what kind of constraints are you and all your team are currently facing?
Well, I would say I think it has been interesting over this last, what now is almost 2 years. As we've moved forward, I think that there has been a sense of normalcy right around the corner. Mm-hmm. And what I have really noticed recently in talking with both team members that are working with me, as well as even with clients, it is this frustration that the old normal is not back. And I think trying to figure out how do they operate? How do you move forward like this? For us as a law firm, we have brought in some of our associates. We have interviewed people that have been hired, and some of whom have worked almost 2 years and had not actually been able to come into an office. And so it's building that community with those team members, because again, you're only as strong as your team is, and figuring out how are you going to do the training that would normally be done? How do you establish that community, even though things may be not back to what we were originally used to?
Mhm. And have you got a success story that you can share with us, or even a story, success, again, I'm using it very, very gently these days, but a story that we can help ourselves, we can help people who are joining us today. Maybe it will resonate, and I'll give them a couple of tips on the how to overcome those.
Absolutely. What comes to mind for me, I have to admit, I was somewhat shocked when we got the recent rankings of the summer associate programs, and Morrison Foerster had done so well, and our particular office had a perfect rating on our summer associate program. And it was fascinating to sit back and to say, how did we achieve this right now during this time when in our minds there were so many limitations? We weren't able to just walk down and take someone to coffee. But I think the realization was we were actually communicating. We were using, whether you're on Zoom or you're on Teams, whatever you're using, it was the connections. And I think that is what we have to step back and remember. It's people being able to connect in order to mentor, in order to grow your team. It's a relationship. It's taking that time. And even though you may have to think of creative ways to do it right now, it shows that you're able to do that. You're able to do it. I give full credit to our marketing and recruiting teams for some of the very unique things that they have come up with. We even had an ice cream tasting event, which I had no idea such a thing could happen, but there on my front doorstep came like 15 different little mini ice creams. My kids wanted them. I had to explain it was for an event. They do not believe these are real events. But it's finding ways, I think, to still build those relationships. And Darcy, to your point, I think it makes us step back and say, are we thinking that there is more of a limitation than there really is? Or is it just doing something differently than what has been done in the past?
Wonderful. Darcy, what would be your response to that? And also an example. Thank you, Erin. I love the idea of the ice cream tasting. Like you, I'll just hide them from my kids. Don't know if I would win, but it just shows also creativity. It just I think the line that resonates with me the most is do something differently. Mm-hmm. Because when you're faced with a constraint, it's so easy to fall into the trap of either complaining about it or feeling really overwhelmed about it, or trying to do something clever, but just do something differently. And that is such a neutral invitation to think differently about something. Darcy, over to you. I'd love to hear your story. So you're running a business. Congratulations on entering the US market now as well. You've got some significant challenges. You're in the healthcare industry. Do you have a story you could share of how you as a leader, or maybe your team and organization, dealt with the constraint?
Yeah, you know what? I loved Erin's examples, and before I switch into mine, one thing we did last year at Christmas time is in the past we've had a lot of fun with a gift exchange within our home office team here, and so it's where you pick a gift and then someone can exchange it, and there's all this trading going on, and it's quite a bit of fun. And we couldn't do it last year because of COVID, or we thought we couldn't. And instead, what we did is we created a virtual background where we had different steps. We put all the gifts that had people drop off on the steps. And there were a couple of us in the office that kind of facilitated the exchange via Zoom. And it was still a ton of fun, even though we couldn't be together. But that's another example I'd add to Erin's. Mm-hmm. You know, like in terms of FY Health Group and some of the examples, and I think a really tactical or a leadership one that I'd like to share is, through these virtual meetings, I felt that I need to be a kind of a strong leader, and need to ensure that when we leave a meeting, we've got clearly defined actions and direction. So we had a Zoom meeting. over 45, 50 minutes and try to conclude everything by tying a bow on, here are the next steps, here's who's accountable, et cetera, et cetera. And, then looking at the camera, I'll never forget it. I looked around and it seemed like something didn't quite sit right, even though I thought we had 100% clarity. And so in the moment, I asked the question, I said, you know what, before we conclude, how about we go around and we ask each person here what they're thinking, but they haven't actually said. And, like a seemingly simple question. And as we went around the Zoom, the boxes on the Zoom, what quickly became apparent is that, me working hard to lead and drive towards a solution was clearly missing some pretty significant pieces of content that I didn't know. And by asking everyone, by the time we got around the table, it became pretty clear that we had completely the wrong decision. So none of the actions were right. And even worse is that people weren't engaged on the direction that we were going because it just wasn't right. And so, a lesson for me was, like my own leadership doesn't need to be one where I'm driving to solution, and I need to lever my team better, even in this virtual kind of setting through Zoom. So that's one. A second one I'll share is, before the state of emergency of the pandemic became real, as a health organization, where doctors, like I say, we have over 600 doctors. They have to make healthcare decisions, and it's their choice as doctors. And on March 5th, so this is a little bit kind of ahead of when things, I think, really really became a state of emergency, we issued our first ever company mandate. And coming from our home office to our doctors, we don't use the word mandate. It's almost a swear word here. So it's a mandate is not a good thing for a doctor coming from headquarters, I guess, or home office. So we issued this mandate, and it was around travel restrictions and things like that. And immediately after I issued the mandate across the company that if someone traveled internationally, they couldn't come back in the clinic for 14 days. I immediately started getting calls from doctors saying, "So are you telling me I have to ask your permission to come back to my clinic if I've gone to the US?" And my reply was, yes. And I heard back, well, like seriously, you can't tell me what to do. And I said, well, I can, and I am. And part of it though was, being transparent that I'm not sure that it's the right answer. Like however, collectively, we think it's in the best interest of our company, of the communities, the patients that we serve, and our colleagues. And so, coming from that place of vulnerability, while having the confidence to stick to the decision, even though I was scared, that was I making the right call? What was I doing to culture? Using a mandate in a culture where mandate's just not used, and it was hard, but having courage was important, and staying the course while being vulnerable was also quite powerful. And those same one of the same doctors 3 weeks later phoned me up and said, I have to apologize. And I said, apologize for what? He said, I thought you finally completely lost your mind, with that mandate. And he says, I got to apologize. He said, I wish you'd have went, even, more out there in terms of, the mandate and the thinking, but you don't know at the time. And so sometimes you have to have courage even when you're scared as a leader.
Thank you. That's sometimes you have to have courage even when you're scared as a leader. I think when you're facing constraints, as I said, it depends whether the constraint fuels your motivation, whether you're the kind of personality that loves obstacles and fuels the fight against, and you've got this sort of strong survival instinct. Maybe you were the younger child or the middle. It's not about oldest, middle, or youngest, but maybe you were the child whose parents said, "Oh, this one can get on with anything." You kind of carry on this attitude through life. Then I just wanted to very briefly talk about the book because it is so topical. Really is topical, and the book is structured into 3 different sections. It helps the reader, I suppose, to respond to stories or to have stories of personal challenges and how can these be converted into personal purpose. There are some chapters about how pain can be very transformational and it can actually turn into advantage. There are also some stories that talk about barriers and how they can inspire courage. And I think both of you talked about this in different ways. And that courage can really unlock quite unbelievable innovation. And finally, obviously, health obstacles can also be turned into great personal power. If I could just ask Darcy, and I'm conscious, Erin, I haven't sort of brought your voice into the session, just bear with me for one more question. But Darcy, what was your favorite chapter? And it's probably very unfair because there are so many friends in the community who will be listening to this one day. So maybe one of your favorite today in this moment that you can tell us about.
Well, you know what,
you learned something from it.
Oh no, my worst nightmare, asking for a favorite chapter.
Okay.
But you know what, I'll just start with the first one. Connie Dyken wrote the first chapter, and I'm picking hers because it's first. And she chose to be vulnerable and share her personal journey, which she indicated as we were talking through the process that she'd never done. And Alex, I think it's not all that dissimilar to your chapter as well. So I think there's a strong correlation around our personal life's journey, has helped reveal who we are. And Connie and Alex, you as well, through the challenges that you faced, it revealed what's at your core. And I think for me, those insights are really important, as you look ahead, or even as you think about the challenges that you face, because it talks about what's there, but maybe it's not seen, and realizing that sometimes doing the hard thing is the right thing, and so I pick on Connie's because of the personal challenge that she faced and overcame. Okay,
thank you. Yes, and that was definitely a story that was quite vulnerable to her, or she revealed certain vulnerability, and there was a strength in that as well. And like you said, that sometimes the limitations we face reveal the person who we are, or the core of who we are, what we're really capable of. Can I ask the audience, what kind of constraints have you overcome? If you're comfortable to put in a chat, it would be lovely to hear some examples from you. And I can hear Daniel, he said that some of the constraints you're facing is limited ability for team meetings in person due to the pandemic circumstances, and unfortunately, as the predominance of working from home. Yes, really universal, still going on around the world. And as Erin said, we had this teaser that maybe back to normal is actually going to happen. However, I think we need to maybe reinvent the normal. But what are the types of constraints, examples of constraints that you've faced and you have overcome? It'd be lovely to have a few examples through the chat. When I think about constraints and think about the work that we do, so working with leaders, individuals, and leadership groups, those constraints are absolutely visible and invisible. They can be part of our mindset, part of our psychological makeup. We assume that we can't overcome certain things, when actually small actions and stepping out of our comfort zone, being a little braver, as you said, and sometimes doing hard things can move us into that space of possibility. We do see that people's reaction to constraints differs, whether it's been placed upon them and continues to be placed upon them. So is this constraint fatigue? Or whether that constraint is something they have noticed, like you, Erin, it was your butt. Hey, this is the territory here. This is the horizon for me, but I know what's behind that horizon, and I'm going to get that. So it's your really personal agency and your resourcefulness and your interpersonal creativity to help you get there. I notice also that people I hear a lot of stories of how people have overcome constraints, of course, through working on yourself and your self-awareness and confidence. But the other thing is the beauty of community, how by surprise you can overcome something you really didn't think you could overcome, but being surrounded by well-wishers, by a great team, people who listen. So I think, Darcy, what you said as well, you went around the room at the beginning of your Zoom meeting, and simply purely by inviting a dialogue and listening actively to what people had to say, it unpacked a whole different thing. And perhaps those people who are, you're about to close your Zoom and they wouldn't have expressed themselves, they would have lived with that limitation of, I can't speak, I don't have a voice. So you've enabled that voice, you've enabled that thought that resulted in the different business approach. Adriana, you're sharing that the obstacle you have overcome, or the constraint and limitation, is cultural diversity constraints, being different or feeling different, but building strength from that difference. That's wonderful. That's absolutely wonderful. Something I can really identify with, having come to the UK some 30 years ago, but still being a different person in the UK. And sometimes the question, where is home and who am I? Help. Kidding. The other one, Kevin, you've got ambiguity or lack of clarity on objectives. And then resolve through dedicated time on calendar for strategic thinking and planning dialogue with key stakeholders. This is really interesting. So you've had a constraint, but then you have added another constraint, which is, let's put some things in a diary. Let's kind of constrain it a little bit. Let's create a boundary and put it in a box to help me, I suppose, focus on get this done. So sometimes, as I said, deploying constraints and using constraint as a tactic can also be very helpful, especially in situations or maybe personalities that quite like working through inspiration driven rather than being kind of measured, methodical, and very structured. Great, really, really good examples. Thank you. Any other example, please feel free to put it in the chat. Before we carry on, are there any questions that you would like to ask Darcy or Erin or myself? Or any questions that you'd like to put in a chat or the Q&A, and we will would love to respond and bring that question into the session. So I'll just open the Q&A and I'll look out for that. One of the top traits of exceptional legal leaders was identified as adapting to change. So we've heard it 1,000 times, we've heard it 1,000,000 times, adapting to change. And I think there's something about constraints that is very closely linked, and our relationship with constraints that has an impact on how we adapt to change. So my question was, how do constraints, Erin, maybe over to you, how do constraints play into adapting to change?
Well, I think that when we look at the need to adapt, first off, it's stepping back with the realization of what is it that we're trying to accomplish. I think sometimes one of the greatest challenges can be that you think you're going to move forward the exact same, even with this. So for instance, the working from home and how this is going to be done within the legal community, especially when you're thinking of litigation and you're thinking of trials and mediations, arbitrations, depositions. For the longest time, everyone sort of just put the brakes on and said, that cannot happen. It isn't possible. Now, of course, I think as a strong trial lawyer, you're always looking also to figure out how we can use this to our advantage for our clients. I mean, we must. But also, how can we get done what we need to? Because at some point for a business, having litigations that are just sitting out there, that can be problematic. And so it is figuring out, how are we going to do this? Coming up with the plan and recognizing that we do have so many tools today that it wouldn't have been possible 20 years ago. And we really are so fortunate. And being able to use that, not only to get done what we need to get done, but how can we do it so that we're also looking for opportunities? So for me, one of the things that I really noticed was the opportunity to allow associates to participate in things that normally they wouldn't have been able to, whether it was court hearings, motion practice, even trials. Having a virtual trial where you can have other team members that can be getting that experience and in fact are learning more than they would have been able to had we had a full in-person setting. So I do think that many opportunities have opened up. I think that in fact, what we've realized is we can get things done more efficiently. I can have a status conference with a court in Arkansas this morning, and I can 2 hours later be having a status conference in the Northern District of California. Never could have done this before.
Yeah. Erin, you're talking that the way that you have found a solution is a similar one, because I'm looking at Adriana's question, is a similar one to one where a coach would help a coachee or a group to find their solutions. So you started with, what do you want? And then you took yourself and the team together from a place of I can't to I can. Recognizing it's not going to be easy or simple. It's complex. So getting through the obstacles and constraints can be complex. And Adriana, you're asking any tips on how we can rebound fast from seeing constraints as a limitation to identify the chance to do things differently and seize that opportunity. So I think I can put something in a chat. I'm just going to put a set of coaching questions called GROWS. So GROWS. G stands for goal. So it's you identify exactly what it is that you want. What would great look like? What would good look like? What's happening today that tells you that this is a constraint? It then takes you on a kind of a mental map and a journey where it's asking you, where have you in the past perhaps faced a similar experience, a similar constraint? Could have been in a different setting, could have been in a personal life, and how did you deal with something similar? I remember discussing a very complex issue with one of the leaders, and a similarity was only found through organizing campsites one summer when that person was still at university, and say that was so complex, so many moving parts, so dangerous, and this. It was a very unrelated business experience, yet one that uncovered and revealed something from the past, an inherent resource within that person, and a memory that I have once dealt with something complex. I've gotten in me quite a lot already of resources, mental and otherwise, that I can deal with. I'll put those coaching questions in the chat. I don't mean to minimize saying, look, go through these questions and you can sort everything out. Oh, yes, they actually are loading. Great. So I'll just put them in here. However, have a go at following them and just see whether there is something, maybe 1, 2, or 3 questions that can help you think about that constraint a little bit differently and can uncover something within your existing mindset and resources. So Darcy, just wanted to ask you, there's a slightly different topic as well. I've been doing a bit of research on leaders who have hobbies. It's called Leaders with Hobbies. The research is temporarily on pause only because of the omnipresent COVID. However, what I have found so far is that leaders who have something outside of work, they perform better at work. They tend to engage and connect better with people. They're more creative, they're more resourceful, the list goes on. I can almost imagine some eye rolls as I'm saying that, because I know how busy you are. And we're talking about constraints, and if we're talking about constraints such as time, and here is the facilitator today telling you, pick up a hobby, that'll sort it out. I really don't mean to say that. However, Darcy, you've done this, it happened. How has publishing the book enriched your leadership?
That's a good question. It reinforced the importance of like once you've set a goal, like if you set the goal, is it really like ensuring that the goal that you've set is really something that's important to you, and staying true to it, and taking intentional steps to actually achieve it. So boy, for me, it changed me from being a talker about writing a book to actually doing it. And so I'd say it's given me some confidence that I probably didn't realize I had before doing it. And it's reinforced the importance of just setting some goals, and then even as you take, the hardest thing is to actually start, is what I'd say. So from a leadership perspective, it's given me some confidence. It's reinforced the importance of actually taking a step. So taking an action, not worrying about perfection. There are a bunch of things in the book that if I had to redo, I know I could do way better. But I didn't know what I didn't know at the time. So not trying to be perfect. So a bunch of things. I guess it's reinforced a bunch of things in terms of my leadership that I think are helping me be more effective.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. And this is also one of the, actually very interesting, it's one of the things that research picks up, that those of us who have some activities that we attend to outside of work, so we're not so multidimensional, we are able to be more resilient. We do perform better because we understand the constraints a little bit better. So I'm speaking to somebody who a leader in a large organization, and in her private time, she took up rowing. And the act of rowing and being in a team, not being at the top of the organization, but being part of the team, and having to really put in equal effort and take the feedback. And the feedback sometimes was quite cruel and quite hard. There was no way of skipping sessions just because you could. It really inspired in her a different understanding of leadership, of teamwork, of collaboration, and empathy for other people. And she brought a lot of those learnings into her leadership as well. But on top of building a stronger mind and body as well.
You know what, Alex, as a leader, if you don't take care of yourself, how do you expect to lead and take care of others? And so what I'd say, for me, working on the book too, was caring for myself and my own passion, and and I'd say that in part helped enable me to be a better leader because I was caring for myself too.
Yeah, wonderful.
And I do think that's so important. I've got a quick story I will share from one of my mentors who I trained under, as he always used to explain to us, you talk about being well-rounded and what does that mean? And he would actually draw a circle of a wheel, and he would say, I want you to think of it as a bicycle tire. You need different spokes, but the spokes need to be equal. Because if you have one spoke that is so far out, your tire is not going to operate correctly. And so this is something still today I talk to people about, even when interviewing and hiring, explaining that it is so important to have balance. And you need to, I would encourage people to even go through and to make those spokes and to identify what they are. Is it family? Is it work? Is it, if you're someone who loves to learn, or a sport, painting, but having balance, because I completely agree. I do think those that are the best leaders, they do have balance and they have other outlets, and that allows them to actually excel at the job that they are doing. Because it isn't the only priority in their life.
Mm-hmm. Brilliant. Yeah, very, very healthy and very sound advice. And Erin, we talked as well before the session started, how we are noticing deepening exhaustion in many parts of the world, many quarters of the world. I just wanted to also just go back to, I'm just looking at Adriana's question, because really it's about, I think, culminates what we came here to talk about today. Any tips on how we can rebound fast from seeing constraints as a limitation to identifying the chance to do things differently and seize that opportunity? I like even the use of the word rebound. It's a word that is often used in resilience. So even already, Adriana, using that word and recognizing that there is a rebound, that you can bounce back up, it already is a great sign, because it means you've got that inquiry that is very linked to resilience. And the questions I sent, I just maybe just to spend a moment to explain the coaching, speaking obviously from a coaching methodology, it helps people to find a solution to their perceived limitation. So it's either self-perceived or a real limitation. These questions that I have put in there, they pay respect to the fact that it is a real experience for you. So that limitation and the constraint you're experiencing is real to you. However, by asking questions around different life experiences, it is designed to tap into some inner wisdom you already have. And maybe you haven't yet exercised and opened up that wisdom in this particular context. I would really advise that you could have a conversation with a friend you trust. Ask your friend to ask you those questions. So email this to your friend. You can do, happy hour on Zoom and say, look, your task is here just to listen to me and to ask me these questions. Allow me moments of silence, 2 or 3 minutes per question. Just let me think. Because very often what's happening with our constraint mindset is that we go round and round and round. We think about it in the worst moments when we're already preoccupied with something, or our relationship with constraints become exacerbated when we are already triggered by something. So the moment of resourcefulness dips, the moment of self-esteem dips, and that's where, again, we're reminding ourselves of our constraints, and it can feel really, really overwhelming. So the best thing is to structure and plan a time of the day or the week where you think, I can give my best thinking for this. I can give it a half an hour of really good quality thinking, make myself comfortable. I sit somewhere nice. I plan, an hour of a nice conversation with somebody. And I would encourage you, if you have, ask a friend or a colleague or a partner to walk you through these questions, simply asking you those questions without offering advice and without interrupting you. That's the only thing you can do. It's just a human presence to hold you in your monologue, in your allowed reflection. I sometimes do this with groups where I get people to write down their answers in silence. So I, as a coach, all I do, I'll ask these questions that help people to find the solution. Because by finding the solution, what's really interesting, and I think goes back to one of the Kevin's comment, is that you could actually structure your possibilities and get to them bit by bit. So you're putting almost like new constraints on the possibilities, if I'm making sense here. Let me just have a look. Any other comments? Okay, lovely. So you had that. So let me have a look at whether I can ask any other questions. Or Erin, is there anything, or Darcy, that you'd like to raise?
I just wanted to give an example that came to mind as we've been talking about this. And I know it is so hard when you are in the midst of a constraint to see outside of it. And so I think your tips were so great. And I think what we have gone through in this last year and a half, it has allowed us to see examples that we don't normally see because of the similarity of the type of constraints that we were operating under. And so I do think it is a great time hearing different stories and how people did things. One thing for me that really stands out as I think both invigorating and motivating to myself in trying to think outside of the box was hearing from a group of employees of a company that it was a high-tech company, but when they went into the lockdown, they came together and said, we want to be able to do something to help. And they brought in different resources so that they could develop a ventilator and get it out on the market. And, to see these different groups come together. And then, of course, they were reaching out to us to see if we could help them with the necessary EUAs and how that would work. But it was so rewarding to think that, each person that is dealing with this is looking at it differently. And I do think just stepping back and saying, what do I want to do? Here's how I feel constrained, but what do I want to do? And who can I reach out to that can help make it happen? I do think that even though we're in a time of not being together in person as much as usual, I think people are so receptive to hearing from each other to say, this is my idea, who can help?
Yeah, wonderful. Thank you. Thank you very much.
You know what, like a metaphor comes to my mind, and like if you view constraints kind of like a playground. So, we put a fence around the playground to protect the kids playing inside the playground. So within the playground, everything's a go. But you've got that kind of barrier that's protecting you. And then I translate that to our business. During the state of emergency, we went from 100% down to 6%. So we weren't manufacturing. Our ophthalmic laboratory wasn't manufacturing lenses. We were doing literally 6% of the daily volume that we're doing, and so you go, boy, that's not good. But what it did do is it presented an opportunity because we had plans for capital investment to streamline and automate certain parts of the production process, and having those playground fences of now our production volume dropped by 94%. What a perfect time to actually invest in the business. So by being safe inside the playground, we were able to utilize that to our advantage. So coming out the other side, all of a sudden we had all this extra capacity that's enabled us to accelerate beyond where we could ever have dreamed, had we been just operating like we always were.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. That's exactly where the constraint really helps becoming more innovative and brave into thinking. Suppose I'm still drawn to the one thing though that can go on, can be harder, and that is the constraint and exhaustion. When the constraint and exhaustion come together, it's paralyzing. And I've seen the greatest minds being paralyzed, burned out, turned off, dimmed. I don't mean to be poetic about this, but I really have seen that's where there's a danger to some of the empowering quotes, such as "you can be anything you want, you can do anything you can," etc. I think if anybody here in the room today recognizes that maybe you are at that crossroad of exhaustion and constraints, I would say take care of yourself first, look after your sleep, reach out to people that love you, that hold you in the space, that care for you, reach out to colleagues, and just go very gently to start with. Don't rush, to get through don't be hard on yourself, but definitely surround yourself, as Erin said as well, community and people, because that's the place where we can be very, very hard on ourselves and have very high expectations of ourselves. Being high achievers, I assume, and many of us here in the room would have had the high achiever syndrome. So we will try to push through things without recognizing where we may need really to first take care of ourselves in the current state before we can actually push through the constraint that we have an ambition to push through, but just something keeps holding us back. I like Daniel, thank you very much, Daniel Slattery, who put in a chat what kind of constraints you had to overcome and how you did it. So personal constraints of a tendency for defensiveness in reacting to feedback, and overcoming it over time by working with trusted mentors and self-reflection and effort. Now I am better able to mentor as to defensive behavior. Thank you so much for sharing this. You are revealing the truth of many of us here in the room. And again, in times of exhaustion, in times of when will the back to normal happen, getting then a constructive feedback, it's just hard. We could go around the room saying, do you want to grow and develop? If you're exhausted, And some people say, I just really want to go to sleep. I haven't slept. I've been working 16 hours a day. My children, I don't mean to, because, you know, a lot of the sessions we do talk very openly about challenges they overcome. We also have incredible achievers in the room. So we have achieved so much through dealing with constraints. We just like to keep these conversations on a very human level as well, because if we don't, we will create some kind of a pretense that all these are very doable and easily to work around with. So Daniel, thank you. I think it's a very good one to end our session on. Your learning of personal development and dropping that defensiveness and understanding how to turn it around with the help of people proves that point a little bit about reach out to people. No man is an island. We need people around us to help us deal with those constraints as well. And thank you. I think I've seen another one. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining. We are now just come, actually, yeah, it's 6 o'clock in the UK. I'm dialing from London. Thank you so much. And if you are interested, this book has got so many interesting stories. I was just reading yesterday one by Alisa Khan. Really fantastic read. Huge congratulations, Darcy, on having it happen, making it happen in such tough times for you business-wise, and obviously leading the business to such success in difficult times. And also, Erin, thank you so much for joining and shedding light on what you, as a leader in the legal community, also dealt with and how you have overcome this. So thank you both very much for coming, and thank you all for joining us for this episode as well.
Thanks, Alex.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. All the best.